All right, so we're going to have a rapid fire kind of meeting to have staff and our community partners share out work that they're doing on various components around, equity and climate actions in the city. We have some amazing folks here who are doing great work on both ends. The Ward 2 office really wanted to have opportunity to uplift the seriousness in which our community partners and city staff are really, working to address climate change issues, how we're doing reparative work with our communities, especially in the green zones where we know there is a history of environmental racism that, again, it's not in the past, but it's ever present as well. So we wanted to have an opportunity to talk about some of those things. And then from there, just kind of wrap things up. I should have did like a brief introduction. Hi, Councilmember Robin Munzig, I represent Ward 2. One piece of work as it relates to climate justice that our office is really excited to be working with our colleagues and staff and community partners around is the Minneapolis, the People's Equity and Climate Plan. We're really, really excited specifically to lead on one piece called PCAR, which is the Pollution Control Annual Registration, which is basically a fee on carbon emissions and really gets at, corporate polluters that we know emit, the most highest levels of carbon in our city that contributes to, dangerous levels of pollution. So we're really excited to, be moving that work with folks like Patrick, also with fellow council members, Council President Andrea Jenkins, Council Member Jeremiah Ellison, and Council Member Jason Chavez. So we're really excited to be relaying updates on the movement around that ordinance in the coming weeks. But I'm going to pause there and let folks introduce who they are because they are really the more important people here. So I will start from to my left, and then we can go all the way down.
Yeah, my name is Krystle. I work with the Minnesota Environmental Justice Table, and our campaign and the work we're doing right now is centered on shutting down the Herc incinerator on the north side that is emitting toxins and polluting, harming a lot of the frontline communities in those neighborhoods. Great.
And my name is Marcus Mills. I'm with Community Power and Black Visions, to name just a few. And we've been working on a number of initiatives helping out with the People's Climate and Equity Plan. We've been working on climate justice in the Minneapolis area and at the Capitol with the Clear Bill to try and achieve actually greater environmental justice throughout the state and especially in the city. We've actually been a part of a number of coalitions trying to achieve greater equity, like the Frontline Communities Protection Coalition work, trying to make sure that polluters can't pollute specific areas, like forgotten neighborhoods or the places where the people don't have a great deal of political power. These places are often heavily polluted, and because of that, we need to make sure that there are caps on that kind of capacity to endanger the health of people just because of a lack of political power. So just to name a few points, that's where a number of pieces of our work stand.
My name is Patrick Hanlon. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Sustainability, Healthy Homes, and Environment for the City of Minneapolis Health Department. I oversee those three different areas. There's a lot of overlap with the things that you just talked about, Councilmember, and what you're working on. The sustainability and outreach piece, I'll let Kim talk about that as the Director of Sustainability and some of the climate action planning going on right now, climate equity planning going on, sorry. And then the other two groups that I oversee are related to the environmental group, which is the operations. So as we pass policy and get things put into place, working with council members, what does the implementation of a lot of that work look like out in the community? And we've had a lot of success in grant programs that we've got out into the community, especially in our green zones in North Minneapolis, South Minneapolis. Those are areas that had historic, intentional racist practices that cause disinvestment, de-investment in those communities. So we have programs that intentionally put money back into those communities first. And And so we're really looking forward to, with all three, the other piece that I oversee is Healthy Homes, so that's kids with lead poisoning and asthma, childhood asthma, so the in-home causes, and so working on mitigation for that. And so it's looking at connecting policy with implementation out in the community and the role that the city plays in helping to make that happen.
All right, well, thank you. Bonjour relatives, my name is Cassandra Holmes, better known as Cassie, or Niwin Makwai Kwe, Four Bears woman. I'm a resident at Little Earth of United Tribes, which is situated in East Phillips. I am a community health worker and also a patient navigator for a local clinic. My big passion and fight is for community justice and rights. And everything that everyone talked about so far is fits right in there. Actually, East Phillips is very unique in that we do have a state law that is supposed to protect us, the Clark-Berglund Environmental Justice Law, that is supposed to protect us against cumulative pollution from any entity that's coming in our community with any plans. And at the moment, we have lost in court, but we are suing the city for not following through with that state law. We are fighting to have green jobs, green education, green training, and housing for unsheltered relatives in East Phillips. And unfortunately, have to fight pretty much for our life and our rights, to our basic human rights to breathe clean air and drink clean water. So in Little Earth, we have up to 38 different tribes that are represented at the moment. So there's like a form of genocide happening to 38 different tribes at one time at one place that will reach generations to come. So our fight is to be able to have a say in our community. We have a beautiful community plan, be able to put that together and to change the dynamics of our community, to be healthier, to have opportunities. We have some high rates of asthma. I have one of my babies here today who has asthma. I have asthma. So changing the dynamics for our kids and for our future, because we love them, just like our ancestors loved us. They didn't know us, but they knew we were going to exist. And that's the way we have to think. That's the way we have to move forward. And also volunteering with CARE, and I'm sorry, but the acronym always gets me, but Companions and Animals for Reform and Equity, because animals are an important part of our lives. And many of the stories, including my people, the Anishinaabe, the animals are the ones who gave us land back during the flood. So our animals suffer as well. Our animals are suffering from the injustices, and so I fight for humans and animals.
Great. And my name is Havey. I'm Director of Sustainability at the City of Minneapolis and part of Patrick's team in the health department. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I work a lot, as Patrick referred to, with a lot of the policy work and regulatory work, as well as oversee the planning aspects related to the Climate Action Plan, the Climate Equity Plan. So we have some good news to report in that from our previous work on the climate action, we actually have seen a 30% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions community citywide since 2006, which is our goal was to have a 30% reduction by 2025. So we're ahead of that goal. We've actually adopted new goals now based on the COP26 conference in Glasgow, Scotland, to accelerate the work that has to be done. And part of this is an environmental justice issue as well too, on a worldwide level, because of the fact that Minneapolis has, and this is the United States in general, but Minneapolis is part of that, has produced more emissions and has benefited more financially from the environment and the use of it. The use of it, I guess, would be a nice way to say it. And right now, what that basically says is that as part of this global pact, as part of COP26, they agreed that countries who have polluted more and have more wealth per capita need to be the ones that are accelerating their work at decarbonizing. So we've adopted what is called the Race to Zero to get to net zero carbon by 2050, but it incorporates a new concept called the carbon budget, in which there's a total amount of emissions that are allowed as a budget for the community, and ours are about 38 million metric tons. Shouldn't probably use that big, any numbers like that without relative context. But anyway, we produce somewhere around 4 million metric tons a year. between 4 and 5. So we have a total carbon budget through 2050 now of 38 million metric tons, and we need to be able to be on a curve that reduces our overall emissions about 65% by 2030, which means we really need to accelerate the work that we're doing on all kinds of levels. So one of the things that we've initiated, and we're very near and hoping to present to council, the plan is on April 19th, is a climate equity plan for the city, the community, as well as the enterprise. That'll be fairly encompassing, and we've been on a very intentional outreach and engagement effort with a lot of different communities throughout the city over the last year, really looking for ways that how do we really connect this to people in their actual lives. And some of the things that we're seeing actually are very much represented in the MN 350 climate and equity plan, People's Climate and Equity Plan. And that's like things, looking at things like energy burden and using that as a metric as part of our climate equity plan. Looking at things as Sean has been great with bringing things forward around the interconnectedness between air quality and the health of the community and carbon emissions. You know, the reality is the air quality is very much related to particulate matter and emissions from burning fossil fuels, whether in your car, in your buildings, or at a factory of some sort. And so if you are able to improve air quality and you focus on improving air quality as a health measure for communities, and you start with communities that are, like in our case, known as the green zones, environmental justice communities, who have been on the front lines of pollution and need the reduction the most quickly. We're going to focus on that as our priority in the climate equity plan that we have as well too. So air quality is an issue, and we've got some great stuff going on right now, just really getting baseline and understanding what our air quality is and how it changes over time. And we're looking at things like what are the ways that we can actually make the community healthier, wealthier, and be more resilient to the changes of weather because of climate change. So ultimately, we're gonna the big thing we're working on is to land that particular plan in April, and then to use that as a way for us to look at a climate legacy initiative, which will really try to focus additional funding, whether it be PCAR funding or some of the other things we're looking at from the federal government. Right now, they have funding for greenhouse gas reductions, sort of referred to as a green bank, $27 billion available nationwide. So the ability to access $100 million to really improve the housing stock and really do it systematically and not one by one, where every homeowner has to go through the process of understanding what has to be done and get the contractors, but really make this something that's easily understood and that we do it in a systematic way, where we're doing thousands of homes, not 300 homes a year, for weatherization. And when we get all of that completed, we'll see that we have improved air quality, we'll have more resilient homes to hot and cold weather, and we'll have better indoor air quality as well too, because those homes that are better insulated also come with better ventilation systems. Once we have that and we were able to reduce those costs for energy, then we'll be able to transition into an electrification effort within these homes. And we'll do it somewhat incrementally, but we're going to do it in a way that is as fast as we can without increasing the energy costs of those who are at least able to afford it. So that's got to be our principles where we are on this cutting edge. We'll also be looking for ways to encourage people who do have the money to make the change more quickly. I'd love to do something fun about changing out your appliances, your stove and your oven to electric in homes and in restaurants with chefs. It's kind of an interesting thing. They've done some creative things with chefs who are now using convection stoves and ovens, So there's an opportunity to make this a really cool transition, like electric cars are cool, convection ovens are cool, heat pumps are cool, I think. So there's a lot of ways that we can also promote it from that standpoint, and I don't think you can really, think you can underestimate the need to really also have this communications going on about trying to make things fun, interesting, hip, on the edge, as well as doing the work behind the walls that isn't as sexy. So we need to continue to have this encouragement for more renewable rooftop electric. Love to see that being accelerated. I think we've seen a lot of work on that in the last 10 years. We need to continue to see that move faster. We have a goal of getting 30% of our electricity from renewable sources within the city by 2030, 10% by 2025. We're already at 8. People said it couldn't be done when that goal was set just in 2018. So it's really, we can really do this, but we have to also have the policies, the regulatory environment, which quite honestly is lining up really well right now. There's a really good window of opportunity between the state government, the feds, and the work that we're doing locally. So we hope to be able to really build off of what's been done with MN 350. I think our alignment and our plans, you'll see, are very much in alignment. And we hope to be able to work together with the community to come up with a really robust way to implement this with additional funding sources. So we're looking at those as well this year, and hopefully we'll start seeing some really big increases in the work that we're doing. And it has to come also with the ability to train people and to be able to support entrepreneurs. I think that's where a huge opportunity exists with the expansion of the number of homes that are being insulated. You know, it's a fairly confined, small, 15, 20 businesses that do air sealing and insulation. We're gonna need to have 50 businesses of that. So that's where I think the city could come in, for example, and be able to say, if we have additional climate legacy funding, say we're gonna contract with new startup businesses that are trained and licensed in air sealing and insulation to do 500 homes over the next 3 years. And that contract they can then take to the bank or come to the Green Bank to get funding, to hire people, get started, to get going, and get a truck, and build these businesses that it has really long, because we've got to be doing this for 10, 15 years, to do this many houses, over 88,000 single family homes in the city. So there's a lot of work that we can do to build BIPOC businesses, and there's a lot of work we can do to build high quality, good paying jobs as a result of this work too. And so our principles are trying to do it local, trying to keep it simple. We want to make it safer, faster, more convenient, and less costly. We do that, we'll all have, and that's a hard nut to crack necessarily, but it's possible. We've seen it done on many other technologies, and there's a huge enthusiasm for people to do this. And I think we've been really weighted down by the inertia of lack of federal government stuff, but also just the different messaging that goes on between all of our utilities and carbon-based companies and everything, that it's really hard to sort of, move on from what the status quo is, because there's people that like the status quo. And that's going to be a really hard one to push, but we can do that here in Minneapolis because we have a more, honestly, progressive, engaged community that wants this stuff, and we don't have to be so focused on what the big gas company who runs Texas has to say. We don't have any fossil fuel here, zero. We export $15 billion a year to buy fossil fuel from another part of the world or part of the country. So we turn that back into our own investment. That's really what our own communities, that investment in ourselves, that will be really a game changer and make Minnesota, Minneapolis really, I think, an absolutely fantastic, clean, green place to live.
So I do want to take a moment, since I think, Kim, you laid out very thoroughly kind of the city's approach and thinking of how we're becoming a resilient, 21st century climate champion. I want to note too, we have community advocates who have been part of some of the, or actually been at the forefront of a number of environmental justice fights that I think oftentimes the city has not been on the right side of. And I do want to give space to highlight some of the things that might not be making it into that plan, especially in thinking of with funding, also with carbon emissions. I do want to just take a moment and give space for Krystle to talk about the work you all have been doing, especially in partnership with North Minneapolis residents around closing the HERC, which has been around for several years. Or several decades. And as you noted too, and the connection of having increases in asthma rates, cancer rates, the respiratory illnesses that comes with having that concentrated pollution, and what is not coincidentally predominantly Black and brown working class communities. So I do want to give space for Krystle to talk about the work around the HERC closure, where that's come from, and also how folks can get involved.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cassandra. Yeah, so I think, you know, with the HERC campaign, this is a fight that's been going on for more than 30 years. When it first was placed in North Minneapolis, it was initially supposed to go out into the suburbs, and got redirected to the north side because they rejected it. And so when it was placed in the north side, those residents, that community didn't want it to begin with. Essentially, everyone we had talked to during this campaign either didn't know or doesn't know that a trash burner that takes care of 70% of the county's trash exists in their backyard, which is a problem in of itself. You would think a facility like that would be a known entity in that neighborhood, or if they did know about it, 100% of those folks said we didn't want it when it first came in, or if they, you know, had lived or moved into the area afterwards and knew about it, also had a very negative view and feeling about what that facility was doing in that in Zone 5. And so, you know, the campaign has really focused on building those relationships with residents and communicating the education around the incinerator, because the incinerator, the county loves the incinerator. I mean, just point blank, it really names it as sort of this green solution to landfills, and that, you know, is really just greenwashing propaganda. It's the incinerator, the facility is named the top polluter in the county, and it's the 31st biggest greenhouse gas emitter in the state. And so this facility, you know, again, if you're walking around the airport, for example, and you're throwing out your trash, all you would see in those trash bins is this waste is being turned into energy. The name itself, Hennepin Energy Recovery Center, and that's how most incinerators are labeled across the country. Again, it's greenwashing, and this trash burner is also, even if you're saying, you know, it's named as not a solution, it's still painted as sort of this lesser of two evils, which most of the pushback we get from folks who are usually not Northsiders, mind you, around, oh, isn't the incinerator though better than a landfill? That's actually just, it's a different evil, again, because of the emissions that come out of that. Especially as we're talking about here, right, the more plastic we're producing, the more plastic we've consumed, burning that plastic emits one of the worst toxins to human health, which is dioxins. And we aren't slowing down on producing plastic at the moment, right? So thinking about those kinds of emissions, particulate matter, this incinerator is really a particular evil. And, you know, even for those, again, who still want to defend the incinerator over landfilling, it's still, I'd be hard pressed to understand and believe why, you know, that incinerator, that trash burner was placed in the north side, right? If it was so healthy, was so green, it was so state of the art, then that should have been just a fine plan for where it was supposed to initially be built in the suburbs, which turned out to not be the case. And, you know, again, also talking about the standards that we have from the EPA, from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, these standards are not fit for health, for proper health, especially by vulnerable communities, like those living, you know, in East Phillips, those living in the north side. That neighborhood specifically that the HERC lives in has the highest asthma hospitalization rate in the entire state. Mind you, Black children are 5 times more likely to die of an asthma attack. And so this incinerator, you know, again, it's environmental racism. But again, there's so much attachment to it because the county, and I think a culture at large, can't imagine waste diversion, right? We're always trying to tackle this, what are we gonna do with the waste? That's also the biggest response to, we need to get rid of the incinerator, but what's gonna happen to the waste, right? Not what is this thing doing in the north side in the first place, but what's gonna happen to the waste? And, you know, for one, landfills, there are environmental, and this is not just coming from us, this is zero waste experts that we've talked to from the country and internationally. There are environmental justice criteria for landfills to divert specifically organics. Organics is what makes landfills particularly toxic. So if we had and the anaerobic digesters coming into play, but really composting and recycling, better waste diversion, especially for organics. Landfill is not nearly as harmful as the incinerator would be. So that's one kind of immediate. We're not proponents of landfills by any means. This is again for the time being. But the incinerator, was supposed to be a short-term solution to begin with. It was only supposed to be around for 20 years, and we're now 30 plus years. So this is essentially a dying facility that they're putting millions of dollars, I think specifically $5 million a year. That's not even counting all the payouts to accidents that have happened from employees. Mind you, also the health impacts have been estimated, and this is supposedly a conservative estimate. It's almost $16 million in health impacts that thing has costed. So all of this money, right, and this is another defense of the county, is how expensive it would be to transition out of this, could be put into zero waste alternatives, right, and that would build jobs. That would create a circular and cleaner economy for the locals, and the city at large, the county at large. So that's a big part of what's going on with the incinerator, and our fight against it, and why we're fighting against it. And we currently have a petition going to shut it down, and that's live, and I have, sign up sheet with me now, but we're also, if you followed us on social media, we have an online petition to sign. So right now, in the next few months is really important because the county is going to be voting on a zero waste plan. And currently, there is not a hard phase-out plan for the HERC incinerator, and so we are pushing folks to demand that incinerator shut down, and we actually put that money into zero waste solutions. So,
Thank you so
I
much.
had a question for Krystle.
Oh, can we go questions
Okay.
towards the end?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Also, we've had people join. Thank y'all for
Yeah.
coming. We're just gonna have folks just quickly talk a little bit more about the work, and then we'll open up for questions at the end.
Just make sure that Patrick we have air quality experts at the city that can help solve problems too. But I just wanted to point out they have this $400 billion for air monitoring and partnering with communities. So I think there's ways of both in Phillips and the north side partnering on air quality. But go ahead.
Yeah. I also just want to give space for Cassie. I just, thinking about green zones, like the community have been advocating for solution sources. The community was clear, don't bring the incinerator here.
Yep.
We can find other ways to invest that money, build an infrastructure towards supporting the collective well-being that does not come with, pollution at their expense. This is an active fight with the East Phillips Farm, where you all have a vision that is fully in alignment with our green zones, with every, environmental justice principle or policy that we have at the city. And you all have been fighting for 10 years in East Phillips, South Minneapolis. So having that solidarity between North and South around these environmental justice issues that community have been taking hold of and asking the city to actually be partners and allies. And can you give a little bit more context of where that fight is right now, you all's vision around that? I think that is the most inspiring piece about the East Phillips Farm is everything that we want, the green jobs, the producing renewable energy that the community can be part of cultivating. So having that collective ownership and being part of, building a climate resilient city. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so like I stated earlier is that we are in a lawsuit right now that we actually lost, the East Phillips Neighborhood Institute and myself personally, about the environmental justice and rights law that's very specific and unique to East Phillips. It's like one of a kind because of the pollution in our community. And Karen Clark, our former state representative, has this beautiful flip chart, horrible information on it, but beautiful flip chart, because she flips it and it focuses a lot on East Phillips and North Side. And it shows how everything builds up in those areas when it comes to heart disease, lead, diabetes, asthma, hospital visits, and more recently traffic. So in East Phillips alone right now, we're at 100,000 traffic in and out of East Phillips. And that's not our data, that's data that we get from like MnDOT or the health, where, all of that is like information that's out there. I'm trying to think where to start. I just think, you know, it's kind of crazy how they are spending like millions of dollars in this area. And if they really, I think, collectively, if they really wanna make a difference and let Minneapolis be like this thing that the world can look at because we're making a difference, they could start in the communities that they did the worst in. And I know I had a person literally say, well, it's not like they can do it overnight. Well, no, we know that, because you've been doing this for 500 years, 100 plus years, so no, but why not start, right? Why not start in these communities where we, you know, put that money and, you know, having entities, the city, state, whoever it is, when they come in to work with community, actually work with community before they start planning projects, not have projects planned and then saying, hey, this is what we got planned, what do you think? That's how Equity was formed, because we didn't like their plan. And we weren't gonna play democracy on their plans with a sticker and say, we like this best. And we weren't gonna go back to our communities like we were asked to and say, come up with what you think would be great in this area, because they were never gonna consider it, but they wanted us to each have these different plans at the table as a community, and we're like, we're not doing that either, right? So we already know what we want, we know what we need. It might not be perfect, and it might not even, you know, it will be the best thing, but it might not be like work out the way we want it right away, but that's better than what they wanna bring in. Their plan, and it's in their paperwork, the city, is they wanna tear down this building, right? It has, we had arsenic in East Phillips that was dug up. I wanna say over 500 areas. It was so bad that, first of all, it had to be dug up and people had to wear protective suits, but not us, not the community. So they wanna tear down this building. There is arsenic down there. It will come up, it will come down.
Excuse me, you are talking about the depot site now?
Yep.
That's the East Phillips
Yep.
farm? Good, okay, that's what it's for.
Okay, yep, and so, sorry, East Phillips, I'm a Little Earth resident. I kinda lost where I was. Hang on.
They're gonna do
Tear it
the
down.
tear it
Yeah, so
down.
they wanna tear it down, and they're telling us, but we're gonna do everything we can to protect you. But they can't tell us how they're gonna do that, cause they can't. They're also gonna bring in, it's gonna total 888 vehicles, and that's in their plan. But they didn't share that at first. It was our architect who found that. And we asked them about it in a meeting with the mayor and other people. And they were just like, oh, wait, we didn't know that. So they're flipping through like, yeah, you're gonna bring in it's gonna total 888 vehicles and some of them diesel. So they're like, but you know, we're gonna electrify everything. But in all honesty, the little print is if they're gonna electrify cars, we can guarantee it's not gonna be our communities first. And then it's gonna be, but when our cars break down, not just we're gonna replace them to make it better. So it could be 20 years down the road before a car breaks down. And also they can electrify everything, right? So I've lost a child to environmental injustice. My best friend has lost her child to environmental injustice. We had a young lady at the Wall of Forgotten Natives who died, and everyone assumed that it was a drug overdose, but it was an asthma attack. And she grew up in East Phillips neighborhood. I knew her and her dad. We had another young lady. We just have so many people passing away, and that's what woke me up. So I'm like, why are all these kids passing away? They weren't born with these issues, you know? And I even asked the doctor, like, is it hereditary? And they're like, I'm sorry, we can't answer that question. Like, it could be they touched something and something went in there and attacked their heart. It could be their environment. Like, we don't know. Sorry. And so that's when it's like, okay, what's really going on? And we realize we're being polluted so bad. And then here comes the city threatening eminent domain, getting this place that we want to turn into a fabulous place in our neighborhood. And they want to bring in more cars, bring the arsenic back up. We were a Superfund site that was taken away. Why, I don't know. I'm sorry, I had so much to say and I'm trying to think it through. You know, we had at Little Earth, we have a little farm, and we had some kids that were skipping school and stuff, and then the executive director had them come in and ask them, why are you skipping school? And they said, we don't have nice clothes, we don't have nice shoes, we're getting teased, we don't wanna go. And then a young man went up to the executive director and said, you need to listen to that, because I was a kid like that. And I start selling drugs to get that money so I can have them nice clothes, and now I'm in the system, the legal system. So Karen Clark, our former state representative, got money from DEED, $319,000, and part of EPNI, Little Earth got $30,000 of that, just like other groups did, and we brought it to our communities and thought, we wanna do something with this money that's gonna be a stepping stone to the bigger picture, right, in our community. So we hired kids. We decided we're gonna hire 5-year-olds to 17-year-olds, and they're gonna work either morning shift from 10 to 12, or afternoon shift from 12 to 2. So they came in as kids. If they needed help, they had help with their parents. They had to ask for a job application. They had to fill it out. They had on-site hiring process. They had to, talk to the executive, and they got hired on the spot. These kids walked out with smiles like this, like, oh my God, I got a job. And then they were asked about what they know about farming and stuff like that. So at the end of it all, myself and other community members, we volunteered because the kids, their money went into a bank account. So they got $300 at first, and we took them shopping. And their parents couldn't come with, but we asked for sizes and we checked to make sure that everything was appropriate. But these kids got to buy all their own clothing. They got to buy their shoes, their backpacks, their clothes. And this was so beautiful because on the very first day of school, here are all these kids out there for the bus, which comes in, one of the buses pick up by our farm, and they're out there eating like radishes, like something they never knew, and they were so excited. We could have pictures. They're out there eating their food that they grew, that they worked with elders, they learned the stories behind it, learned the medicines behind them, and went to school, and they were just so excited. And it started off with about, I wanna say maybe 20 or a little bit over 20 kids. Today we have so many kids that apply that we have to find more funded. 75 kids applied last time. They get $500 now. They learn how to manage their own money on a card, how to buy stuff. So $300 goes for clothes, $100 goes for them, whatever they want, and $100 goes for family night. So, and we have some households where all the kids are hired. So here are kids buying their own clothes, growing food, eating that food, and just so proud of themselves. And that's just a small scale of what our plan could be. So I just wanted to share that.
And then I just kind of want to wrap up. I know, right, Mark? It is. It's like, right. I just want to give space, Marcus, to speak to the People's Equity Climate Plan, because I see that as, and Krystle, you brought this up a lot, I think, around environmental justice work, especially, in our today's climate, the greenwashing of it, of let's not really address the culprit who creates many of these environmental disasters and crises, but let's put a band-aid over it, let's do everything, but actually address, the perpetuators of these inequities. And I think what is so powerful about the People's Equity and Climate Plan is you all name that, and you provide concrete ways in which we can start to address and destabilize and disturb some of those pieces at the city level. You're doing phenomenal work at the state level, and just want to give space, especially also some of the components around funding, which is why we're so excited about PCARs. How do we create protective funds so that we can support initiatives like making sure our babies are fed while they're helping engage in this work of protecting Mother Earth, and growing their food, and approaching new ways to deal with waste. So wanted to give space for you to kind of give an overview of the People's Equity Climate Plan.
All right. So think about this. You want to change the effect that we're having on climate, and you know that you have to accomplish it by a certain date. You create a plan. You come up with a way to go about it, and you start working on the elements of how to achieve it, and then you fund those initiatives. The city decided to do this originally, the last time I was involved, in 2013, and came up with what they called the Climate Action Plan. Well, it's 10 years later, and while the Climate Action Plan was a good idea, it didn't have a whole lot of EJ to it, environmental justice. And 10 years later, they're like, we gotta do this again, because we got whole new different initiatives, we got different plans, we got different goals we need to meet. And so the process came to, well, let's come up with another one. When we forgot equity the last time, we forgot environmental justice, that's gotta be a major part of it. So now we have what Minneapolis originally referred to as the Minneapolis Climate and Equity Plan, based off of an initiative that was started with MN350 and a number of other groups, including several of the ones that I represent, Community Power, Black Visions, etc. And we were coming up with a concept called the People's Climate Equity Plan. And the idea was to ensure that communities were the major contributors to the solutions that we were trying to accomplish. Even the COP agreement recognized that the people in the places where they were needed to be the primary idea creators and implementers when we were dealing with these concepts. Now, our governments are a great way to accumulate power and push it forward, but the real elements have to come from the community. So we built coalitions to come together and derive some of these processes. The city recognized that we were doing a number of these points and invited us to be part of the plan implementation. And so the Minneapolis Climate and Equity Plan has a lot of input from some of the folks who were trying to build an equity plan, a climate equity plan up from the grassroots. And so a number of the things that have come up for these concepts, what Kim was referring to as legacy, we started out with a term we call the Just Transition Fund. The idea of how are we going to actually achieve the money to create these changes. And the ideas were simple. PCAR was one of the ones that came up quickly because we already had it in place. We knew the machinery that caused many of the forms of pollution we were dealing with, and we already charge these companies that utilize this machinery. And so we just said, well, why don't we actually charge them in a way that reflected the effect and reflected the goal we need to reach? That seemed like a reasonable idea. Another fee that the city has that is already in place is a franchise fee. The utilities that give us our energy, our water, our heat, they already pay the city in order to be able to utilize that machinery. They got to dig up the street. You've seen it. So you've got to pay the city to dig up the streets the city put down. It's called the franchise fee. And what we can do is make that reflect the actual effects that those utilities are actually causing on the community. So if you charge them based off of that process, you start getting the kinds of funding that can actually achieve the work towards the goals that we're trying to put forward. The actual goals the community came up with, we can make the polluters pay for it. And that's part of the plan that's been going forward. And beyond that, actually creating the fund that would achieve some of these points, dedicated and separated from the city's own standard budget. The idea is that a lot of that money going to projects that the community creates would actually be governed by community members. So we've developed, there are organizations throughout the city that have a dedication to community and connections to community. And the idea is that they would select the people who would actually govern the fund, so that the projects and programs that we're using to come up with this and we continue to derive from the community can actually be funded, and the funding can be governed by the people themselves. So that's a quick and dirty way of understanding a good bit of those plans.
Thank you so much, Marcus. Yes. So with that, free for questions, intimate group. If any comes up. Yeah?
Will you support doing a carbon emission study for the changes proposed for Hennepin Avenue?
For the Hennepin Ave.
To turn Hennepin Avenue from 2 lanes to 1 for automobiles. Will you support doing a carbon emission study so we actually have an understanding of whether or not diverting cars to make them drive in the longer distance and putting them in more congestion on the roadway will increase carbon emissions? Because I think they will. And so I'm wondering if you would support doing a study so we understand whether or not that change will increase carbon emissions.
I think I can definitely touch base with the council member that represents that area. I'm not familiar with in terms of the new project, or if there is a project around this right now. I don't know if Kim
On
or Patrick
Hennepin
is.
the Hennepin Avenue redesign?
You're talking
Yes.
about the one with the accelerated bus lanes.
With the bus lanes, yes.
And that
With the ridership that's declined
Right,
2/3 of
right.
the last 8 years, yeah.
Mhm.
Would you support doing a carbon emissions study
From my understanding, there has been a number of studies. I think I've been supportive of the Hennepin Ave redesign with the 24/7 bus lanes, and I do support that. From my understanding, the council member has not asked for a feasibility study because there's been a lot of shared support around the redesign and moving us towards those action goals, so that's where my support has been.
Would you support doing a carbon emission study though, so the community knows the impact of that change?
I think I can bring that to the council member and get her perspectives if that's something her constituents would like to see.
Okay? Just as another point for you, the franchise fees actually just get passed on to the citizens, so it's in your utility bill.
Yes, it is a part of
So,
the utility.
yeah,
So those costs would not be borne by the energy companies, those costs would be borne by the citizens.
So the North Sider should continue suffering.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
So the North Sider should continue suffering because of that fee.
No, I'm just clarifying that that doesn't get passed to the company, the company passes that on to the residents. And so if you want to increase that, that would just be an increase on residents in Minneapolis.
Everything the utilities do, everything the utilities are involved in, that money comes from residents.
Correct.
Now, the point is that the very lobbyists that fight what we're trying to accomplish, that money also comes from residents. They charge you for that just like every other operation that they engage in. So the point then becomes, do we use our money to achieve the goals we want, or do we just let them utilize it to fight us for the things that they want to do? And that's where we are.
On my bill, there's a line that says franchise
Oh,
fees.
great.
And if
I
you wanted
acknowledge
to
that.
increase that, then that's an increased cost to me. It's just simply my.
Where
And
does-
I-
And
yeah,
as well.
Where does the franchise fee go to currently?
yeah.
Into the general fund?
Wait.
Yeah, I should say that, yeah, in 2017, there was a franchise
Yeah.
fee that was passed as a 0.5%. There's a full franchise fee that covers, and you're right, it is a pass-through. So it's covering, and Marcus talked about it, is the Excel and the utility operations. They're going out and doing utility work that they're not taking permits out for every time they need to go in, and so it's a blanket fee that's charged. But in 2017, we added 0.5% increase to that, and that money was justified to put back into climate change funding. And so out of that, we created a green cost share program that we've been investing money back into. Actually, 65% of it goes into residential properties, but it also goes to small businesses and other entities, property owners that are doing energy efficiency, solar projects. So we've leveraged since that time, about $5.5 million, and the lifetime savings that comes out of all those projects is around $140 million. So we're really leveraging, and then you leverage about 10 to 1 in terms of economic development that's going on with different investments that are put in. That's one program. We also created a green careers program, and I should say that these concepts came from a lot of conversations with community groups, with environmental justice groups, and Northside Green Zone, Southside Green Zone, of what they wanted to see in the community. So we have additional incentives that go back into the green zones first. So you get higher percentages, higher caps, and higher priority. We send all of the applications out to a third-party certs, and they have a panel that reviews all the projects. And those projects that are in environmental justice areas are the highest priority. And so it's kind of a third party. A little bit what you're talking about is the transparency of community, of a third party organization reviewing those applications. So then the other piece I was going to mention is that there's a green careers program. Folks mentioned that not only we saw a lot of success in the number of projects that were going on in Northside Green Zone, Southside Green Zone. Over 60% of those funds that come in through that program go back into environmental justice communities. But after a couple of years of doing it, we noticed that there's not necessarily a lot of people that live in the community or have jobs on those sites, like on the solar sites, are doing the energy efficiency work. And so again, feedback from the community and talking about folks wanting green careers and opportunities for green careers. So on the north side, we partner with Summit Academy in doing trainings with folks that come out of that program through their electrical and construction programs. And then we connect them with some of the contractors that we're working with on the solar projects. On the south side, they're doing energy efficiency work at Sabathany, partnering with Center for Energy and Environment and organizations like McGeezy And actually in Little Earth, we've done a number of projects there with energy efficiency. So using some of this money to go back into energy efficiency projects. We've talked about solar, and hopefully some of that work can come to fruition as well. And then what else? There's 0% financing that came out of that funding. There was
Our Truth and Sale housing efforts, where we've now done more than 15,000 energy scores on homes that were for sale, encouraging upgrades to that. We're actually going to come out with a new version, TISH 2.0, which is now going to be looking at ways to electrify homes as part of recommendations on that, and offer some more look at like the age of your furnaces and things, which aren't really looked at. It's sort of like, is it older than 20 or not? But to give some sense of people how to like budget into the future, if like 5 years from now you want to transition, because most of the decisions are made at a time when you have a crisis, not a crisis, where if something fails, and then you have to do it, so you're not looking at like, oh, should I get the most efficient furnace or whatever. But we'd really like to be able to see give people recommendations on how they could transition to a lower carbon, more efficient, electrified home.
And I was just going to say, one of the other areas is like low-income housing. 3,700. There's been 3,700 low-income families that have benefited from those programs in reducing energy bills. And then we do a lead and healthy homes program that's kids with childhood asthma, lead poisoning. When they're going in and doing remediation in the homes, that they do deep energy retrofits at the same time. 87% of the folks in those programs are low income. And so at the time that they're going in and doing that work, to make sure that they're doing energy efficiency work as well and improving their indoor air quality.
I'll say, do you mind if I say something about this real quick?
Sure.
So, I appreciate all that work, because I do. Some of the homes that we have 212 units just in Little Earth alone, and I would say maybe 30 of them homes have received some of the stuff that you guys talked about. So, and then also when it comes to solar paneling, like the community plan was to have like one of the largest solar array. I'm not really savvy about that, you know what I mean? But everyone who talked about it was that would have helped our community a lot to have that solar paneling on the community project. So it'd be nice if, like, you know, we have city folks who work really hard for stuff, and then we have this group who at the same time it's like they're doing this but still hurting us over here.
Yeah.
So
Can I ask one, just because I know she had it, and then come back to you?
Sure.
Okay.
So I'd actually like to, I'm a volunteer with Minnesota 350. I've been working on the People's Climate Equity Plan, and I'm sorry that that person just left, because I wanted to just speak to the franchise fee for a second. Is that it has not been directed towards greenhouse gases prior, and so there is a high cost to that pollution. So the fee is on how much greenhouse gas your home, the building, is emitting. And my understanding is that the first few years, residents are going to be not charged that, and give them a chance to retrofit things. So and again, I'm sorry that person left, because, and I think when they talked about how much it would be, and the director of the program for Minnesota 350, I think she said it was like somewhere between $5 and $15 a month, you know, once it got up and running, and that there's programs built in for people that don't have, that would be a burden for them. So it's really well thought out, makes a lot of sense, and I like what you said about thinking about that you don't know your relatives, but you're thinking of them, the ones that come after us. So I just wanted to put that in. And if anybody, I have the letter that we're sending to Mayor Fry to ask for more funding, because the budget that he came out with for climate is not real adequate. So if anybody wants to sign on to that letter, I've got it.
So anyway, just to go back to the initial question about the franchise fee, I'll just say personally, well, just to be clear, I assume, just like we were talking about Henry County, I don't live in Ward 2, I'm like a stone's throw away. But like, I have no problem paying a few more cents, a few more dollars. Like, that's a lot of money that moves every month, you know, between the utilities and people. And, you know, if the franchise fee can be re-engineered to take it rather than just pay for permanent, go to like more long-term solutions, which like, I feel like some people, they don't understand, like in the end, like we'll save money not just on the bill you're directly paying, but also, you know, health costs that aren't yours, right? When someone gets sick and they're in the healthcare system, right? And they're, you know, have to declare bankruptcy or whatever to pay, you know, bills, it's like, it's all closed loop. So, you know, to you know, have to pay just a few cents, a few dollars here or there, you know, especially when it's been engineered by someone who's like, you know, like Mark as a community group, it's like clearly your goals is to like, you know, have actual solutions. Like, I, as like a citizen, I have absolutely no problem with that, and so I just want to make
And
that
the
comment.
fee goes down as the insulation and the electrification and the
Yeah.
houses go up, so.
Exactly. So again, yes,
Yeah.
I don't see a problem at all. Like, you know, so much money spent every day on so much stuff in life to throw a few cents, a few dollars per month towards something that's in the long term will save you money, will make you healthier. I have absolutely no problem with that. I'm totally in support of stuff like that. So yeah.
I know you had a question, then you, and then we come back to you.
Okay. So one of the things I wish Krystle was here, because my wife was one of the first protesters out in front of where they're gonna build the HERC way back 20 years ago. But part of our city's history was redlining, and then they put in freeways, like right where, you know, where people live. So currently, I think the air quality impacts for people of color partly is due to the redlining and where they could afford to buy a house, but also where industries are located and where freeways are located. And so one of the things besides PCAR and the franchise fee is looking at ways of generating revenue from other externalities. People are driving all the time, you know, trucks, cars, without paying anything for the pollution for the people who live nearby those places. Also, like the county's fee for, they can put a surcharge on the tipping fees for garbage, so they could raise more money when the garbage is coming through the garbage burner, they could raise more money to put in to mitigation. So I think the city has a very good, like, small program that could be expanded tremendously related to the healthy homes retrofits, getting lead out of houses, targeted outreach with families to find out asthma triggers. And I think probably 80% of the contributing factor for asthma is indoor air pollution. And so there's ways of air sealing the house to prevent pollution from coming in. And then I have geeky friends that you can build an air filter for $100 that can suck 95% of the particulates out of a room. So what I would love to do is have people on both the east side and north side working to do door-to-door outreach with families that have asthma suffering, to get them access to health care, to have assessment of their house of asthma triggers inside the house, having these really high quality air filters, and getting that paid for by the overall community-wide benefits that are causing harm. Like, for example, if they're gonna have a public works facility in East Phillips with 600 new trucks, and maybe they're gonna tear down the old public works facility over by the river to build a big expensive high-rise, start a tax increment financing district over by the river, use some of that money from the high-rise and bring it back to East Phillips to retrofit every single house within a half mile of the trucks. But I think we need to keep in mind on the asthma suffering families and having them get the help they need sooner than later, because it's gonna take at least 10 years for the waste stream for the garbage burner to kind of ramp down. But we don't have to wait 10 years to actually help families, because 80% of what's contributing to the asthma is inside their houses. And we can address that immediately, but the city does not have enough funding to have enough asthma outreach people. We can have community members helping with the asthma outreach. So I just don't want to see any more people dying of asthma, especially little kids. but we can get out there and get these families help within the next year if we just collect money and get it in the right programs. But anyway, that's one of my proposals for how to get that going, you know.
And
If I can respond, actually, one of the concepts that's coming up for a longer term thought in the People's Climate Equity Plan, you were talking about lots of freeway travel. One of the plans for fundraising in that process is actually creating business licensing fees for organizations that have large fleets, so that we actually are recapturing some of that money. On top of that, unfortunately, Krystle isn't in the room at the moment, but some of the success that they've actually had on HERC is just last week, the 100% clean energy bill was signed in the state legislature, and it was signed by the governor. And in that, there is a measure that exempts the HERC incinerator from renewable energy credits. So about half of its current incoming revenue will be cut from that, so that it's decreasing the economic incentives for the HERC in and of itself. And they are working on trying to see closure of the HERC be part of some of the zero waste planning that's moving forward. They've been doing wonderful work. They just didn't get a chance to bring all of that information into the meeting at the moment. I happen to work closely with them, so I'm happy to do
Well,
so.
we were part of the zero waste cohort, and so what I'm working on is having collaborative implementation between the county, the city, community groups on the zero waste plan, so we can know how are we dealing with construction waste, how are we dealing with organics, and try to see it more transparently. Because I know the county really is depending on Minneapolis to do some things. Krystle just sharing that my wife was one of the first protesters even before the HERC was built. And one of the hopes I have is trying to raise money citywide to pay for asthma outreach and healthy homes retrofits in both Phillips and the north side. Because if it takes 10 years for the garbage burner to be turned off, we can still start helping many, many thousands of families next year if we can raise money and get it into these. I don't know if you know about the city's asthma outreach program, where they have specialists that go out to houses with kids, and they have healthy homes outreach, you know, for retrofitting houses. So if we can weatherize these houses, make sure we can really get the air quality inside these houses good, because that's where 80% of the impact of asthma is coming from inside the house. You know, so let's talk about how we're doing.
thank you for mentioning, I'm gonna go here, there. And I do wanna raise too, I sit on the Rethinking 94 committee, which is looking at other proposals around highway removal to address especially the highway being routed through Black and brown communities now, the redlining, and also what has come as a massive environmental, health tax on those residents who are breathing in and all the carbon emissions that come from that traffic. So also want to note we have that representation. I've been fully supportive of the Twin Cities Boulevard proposal, so I think that's one opportunity to look at how we deal with that piece too. But I will go here. Yep, and then you, and then you.
I just wonder what we're doing to try to wrest control and ownership of the utilities back from these big profit-making companies. I know that contract is renewed.
I know, I was born at Marcus.
If anybody's ever heard of the Minneapolis Clean Energy Partnership, it is the deal we made with our utilities in 2014, because they used to have total control of our climate future, and they used to have it for 20 years at a stretch. In 2014, Community Power and a number of other groups that we were working with actually started working with the city to make sure that that wasn't the way we were operating any longer. And in that time period back in 2014, we created the Clean Energy Partnership so that there would be a decision-making body whose purpose it was to determine the aspects of our climate future, and it would be headed by the city, the people that were answerable to people on the ground. So the point is that franchise agreement, so that created the partnership, that comes up again in 2024. And our city council will be a big part of making sure that the next agreement that we have with our utilities, if any, but the next agreement that we have with our utilities is more equitable, more useful to citizens, and more on our side than on theirs. And that's the work that will be involved in 2024. We need to make sure that the right people are in those conversations, and we need to make sure that we are communicating with the people who are going to be making those negotiations, so that we can tell them what we need from our utilities, and so that the city is getting those requirements from them in the next franchise agreement.
One thing that particularly bugs me with the electric company is how limited we are, how much solar power we can generate on each house.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know?
There are literally limits from the state on how much solar you can generate, on how big a solar array can be if it's not owned by the utility. There are some bad processes that we are working on changing. The community power has been a big part of trying to change a number of those elements, and thankfully we've been getting a lot of help, because as soon as a good idea comes up, people go, that's a good idea, let's get that actually implemented. And so thankfully our friends at the city actually do a good job in implementing as much of it as becomes feasible at any given moment. We just keep coming up with ideas, working with community to make sure they work.
Can you explain why the city has refused to do an environmental impact analysis on the Minneapolis 2040 plan? And why they continue to sue to stop doing that instead of disclosing what's going on? And also, as a separate piece, if you were on the I-94 Boulevard, are you doing a carbon emissions study of the idea of turning it into a boulevard? Two questions. 2040 plan and no environmental impact study first.
What is the 2040 plan, by the way?
Yeah.
It's a long-range plan.
So the 2040 plan was implemented by City Council in 2017 to upzone, so inclusionary zoning, so upzone certain, single-family home areas to build more density to areas, and also I think someone addressed the racist dynamics of housing and planning across the city, of knowing that we have racial covenants on homes across that still exist. And also creating space for residents, Black and brown residents that were excluded from these areas to be able to move in. So there are many components of the 2040 plan that it was not, smoothly passed through. There's lots of elements that receive a lot of public opposition. This is one of the pieces of it, but it was passed by the council with support of the public. And in terms of, it was passed. And then what you're asking for is, has there been a proposal to carry out an environmental study on that?
State law requires under NEPA that they do an environmental impact statement, and the city so far, instead of doing it, has chosen to litigate. Can you explain why the city has not disclosed the negative environmental impacts on the long-range plan that it passed?
And from my understanding, the litigation, and I would love to pass your questions to our city attorneys, I think we are not in that litigation still.
You are relitigating it, and that litigation has been before the city council. And that choice has been before the city council.
Yes, I think our city attorneys, again, can pass that question forward to them. From my understanding, is that they feel very confident that what we passed is in full alignment with our existing policies with state statute, and that is what's being taken up in court. I can pass your question along to them for specificities and bring that back forward. In terms of your second question, as being part of the Rethinking 94, we are absolutely asking the state to do a feasibility study about the Twin Cities Boulevard.
I'm not asking about a feasibility study. What I'm asking for is a carbon emissions study for changing I-94 from a freeway to a boulevard. Because it seems to me that you're going to, for the cars that are going to be on that, they're going to be going stop and go, stop and go, stop and go, creating much more carbon. Or they're going to be taking much, much longer routes, which are also going to create a lot more carbon. And so I'd like to see a carbon emissions study, just like I'd like to see in Hennepin Avenue, because I think that you're going to see massive increases in carbon emissions from these changes, but the city refuses to do those studies.
And from my understanding, the feasibility study that community partners are asking our legislative and Minneapolis delegation to move forward with on the Twin Cities Boulevard project does include that component. and also falls in line with what is happening across the country, where we've actually seen the opposite of that, where you have thousands of cars and trucks that's passing through a highway each day, definitely causing more emissions than a boulevard. So there's actually data across the country. Actually, Detroit, I believe, just got recently selected for their own analysis and work around moving towards a boulevard project. So there's tons of research out there. I would recommend people to check out. There's actually a link on the Twin Cities Boulevard proposal that falls in line with precedences that's being explored by other cities. We're not new to this. That shows this is another way to really address those environmental harms caused by highways. So we are working with our Minneapolis delegation to move forward a feasibility study of the Twin Cities Boulevard and can report back on that as we do with anything that's being discussed in that committee.
But you won't commit to requiring a carbon emissions study.
So just to point out a point from earlier, Kim mentioned that we're moving towards carbon budgeting as a process, which means that if we're doing that in any real sense, in order to understand what an effect will have, what an action being put forward by the city will have, that will be part of our carbon budgeting. So we'll have to know, we'll have to understand, we'll have to actually look into those processes. So just as an element of carbon budgeting in the city, which is what we've committed to in general already, we would have to be doing that kind of work to understand the effects in the long term. So if that helps, that's a thought process that makes that a part of the city's plan.
And with related things, the particulates, just with, like, when you're changing traffic flows, I'm wondering, does the city have ways with your new air monitoring equipment to try to figure, like, if you have changes in traffic patterns, is it gonna improve or make the air pollution worse? And how do you figure out which are the different aspects of air pollution in East Phillips or the north side, and how much are from point sources, how much are from mobile sources?
Yeah.
I'm curious, do we have enough equipment to do that, or do we need more help from the state to do cumulative air impact studies?
I mean, that would be difficult to say with certainty and air quality. There's just a lot that goes into with weather patterns and everything like that. But yeah, we'd certainly want to look at a lot of that. I mean, I don't know how much, in terms of what's there right now, I don't need to see much data. We know that living near major highways is a public health issue. You know, the cases of asthma go up near roadways, the levels of particulate are high near roadways. So I don't need to see that, but yeah, if there were changes that were made, if it's you know, if any of these projects move forward, to look at what the impacts of it are, it would be not only interesting, but, you know, ways to look at what other forms of solutions might be out there.
Yeah, and I do want to know, you had a question in the back, you, and then we're gonna wrap up shortly.
Sure. I mean, I guess I just have a few just things I wanted to mention. I guess, like, when I'm hearing a lot of talking about like emissions, becoming carbon neutral, air quality, stuff like that. I guess the way I see it is kind of like this. You know, it's such a monolithic task. Like, to have lofty goals is great, but also to, like, understand that, like, you know, going carbon neutral completely is, like, such, you know, such a long-term goal. I think it's important, but to understand, like, the limited resources that, you know, people and government have. I guess me personally, you know, and this I think goes off of, like, what a lot of you are saying. I would rather see, if we had to pick a focus, stuff like, you know, air quality, closing the hurt, stuff like that. Like, at the end of the day, you know, if people are getting sick and people are hurting and dying, you know, that's permanent, right? Being able to fix, you know, climate change and take, you know, carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, you know, as much as it sucks to say it, like, that's going to take a long time. And if one thing can wait to keep our focus in one direction, like, I would rather it be that, right? I'd rather it be more focused on the people's health, and, you know, if there's money to be spent, have it be spent there. Like, I think closing the hurt would, you know, and same with the hurt, right? It's like, well, you can't really have both, right? It's like there's trash, right? That's just a reality. Like it sucks, but there's trash. Like I guess I'd rather, again, I don't know much about this, but from what I understand, like the fact that we're burning trash in 2023 and like advertising it as green on the rims of the garbage can at the airport, which, yeah, I mean, when I first saw that like 5 years ago or something, be like, that's so funny to me that it's like, I think they'd be ashamed of it, but they're just like, oh, your trash is turning into energy. Like by burning it, it's like, it's kind of insane to
The
me.
marketing.
You know, and I see what people throw in the trash, right? You know, it's like, so again, like, if, I guess like I'm just trying to, what I'm trying to say at the end of the day is like, I try to be realistic about stuff, and I try to say, hey, look, I want everything that everyone else wants. I want all the environmental goals, but like, if I have to pick one, like, I like to keep the focus on like, you know, something that I know is a health impact on people every day, right? And yeah, you know, and I also want to mention too, like, I see things also as a more holistic, right? Which is why I love the more community-based approach. Like what you were saying about, you know, the kids you had, you know, working on a farm, right? And like learning about food and, you know, having an opportunity to take two problems and rather having to pay money to fix this problem and this problem, you take the two problems and you like knock them against each other and create a solution, right? And you know, the more you know about food, the more you know about nutrition, the less food waste you're gonna have, right? So then you're burning less stuff in the earth. You have less, you know, carbon that gets, you know, I think that what Margaret said is that's the kind of stuff that causes the most emissions, right? Food waste. So it's like, you know, when you have a boulevard, right, then you can, if you don't have a car, you can walk to the grocery store, right? You don't have to like run out of food, call Postmates or whatever, go to McDonald's, right? It's like, and I think one thing is hard when you have like dissenting opinions, I think people don't always see it, that it's, you know, these are all parts of a greater whole together. And I just want to say that like from, you know, again, I don't follow much politics, it's too depressing, and like, I'm not even going to, yeah, but I just want to say like, you know, from what I see about Robin posting, what I know about community power, like, I just really like what all y'all are doing about, you know, pretty much what I said before, like, rather than just seeing, you know, problems as being something that you gotta take money out of people's taxes to pay for, and then people get upset, you know, it's like, no, like, things can be just good. You know what I mean? Like, that can be a world we live in, right? People have a lot of energy, the world's a bountiful place, like, and I just wanna say, like, all the focus on that community-based stuff, you know, as long as it's, you know, done like with the level head and like has the resources and like the people behind it that are like experts that can help inform you when you need to know, like, oh, you know, like, to be honest, like, she did bring up some points, like, you know, if the goal is to reduce carbon emissions and that, you know, and you can prove that like that's not gonna happen, like, you know, you might have to suck it up and say, well, that, you know, it wasn't a well thought out idea. Again, I don't think it is a not well thought out idea. I think there's other benefits to having Boulevard. I love what they're doing with Hennepin Avenue, right? Because now you got more people riding the bus, right? You know, that's way more carbon efficient, you know, safer for bikes. Like, you talk about waste, like, you know, think about all the carbon someone uses in their whole life, right? Then they get hit by a bus, their life's over. All that waste, all the trash, whatever, donezo. And then the pain of all their family members, right? It's like, you know. Anyway, I'm rambling at this point. I just want to say at the end of the day, support what you're doing, love it. Go, you guys.
Thank you. I know Cassie just want to say something real quick. And then
So just quickly, like, one thing with East Phillips too is we also asked for an environmental assessment worksheet. Because of what they're bringing in. That's what they should do, right, with our state law. And then also, I'm also like gonna be part of that asthma action plan within my community. So I'm not only fighting the bigger picture, I'm also gonna be hands-on, going into the homes of my community members and sharing information on how asthma is also brought about, or it becomes more active, like from stuff in our home, and just having that action plan. So working on both sides. So.
Are you working with Vu or anyone in the health department?
Dr. Fum, you mean?
Okay.
Or no, I'm actually working with a nurse who came over to the clinic I work at and specifically was like, can you work with this? Like, because she must have got my name and stuff from all the other stuff that goes on.
Because we can get you resources and stuff to get out to people?
It was a nurse
Okay.
from, yeah.
Let's
we can talk
connect.
about it.
Yeah, like, y'all should look at this.
See those good connections.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add a couple things that, and I won't go on very long, it's quick, but I was surprised when I started working with Minnesota 350 on the People's Climate Equity Plan that 75% of our greenhouse gases come from buildings. You know, and that's why the focus is on transitioning the buildings, so it is going to help with greenhouse gases, it's gonna help with health. So
What mechanism is that has the buildings making the greenhouse gas?
well, it's the heating and the
Yeah.
Natural
cooling
gas
and the
mostly.
cooking,
Natural gas.
you know, it's just kind of, which was surprising to me, I would have thought it was the 94.
I would have thought it was cars,
But
but.
I think that's important, that it's, the plan is, you know, and then the other thing is, and I'm not sure this is making it into this next round, but it's really been talking about this as a dedicated fund, not going into the general fund. So it's kind of like the legacy monies that go, you know, to arts and culture, and the environment. And so I think that's important, that when they're talking about the PCAR and the franchise fee, it's talking about this is gonna be a dedicated fund to do all of these amazing things, so. Just wanted those two pieces.
Yeah, no, absolutely, the protected fund, we have models of that across the city. Maybe the not sexier version of that is the downtown assets fund, that actually is a protected fund of revenue collected by our taxes for the Target Stadium, the US Bank. All of that's pulled into a fund that we can't touch as council members to upkeep and maintain those properties. Why not have that for what you said around protecting the health of the people in our green zones and all across the city, and really dealing with climate justice, and don't be able to pull from that fund for police settlement contracts, like it's just for that. And I think the biggest piece too of this is having the democratic ownership and oversight over it, that, you know, Marcus raised of community members should be the ones in charge. Folks like Cassie who live in these communities, who are creating work to address these issues with young people, should be the type of people governing this type of fund. And also with Krystle, like, these are the people who have been on the ground. Oftentimes I say us at City Hall, we're so disconnected, and that's why I love folks like these, because y'all are here, y'all are front and center, you've been doing this work, you've been telling the city like, hey, this is going on for like 10 years and more, and you should be the ones having the most say in where we put, you know, our dollars towards, when we're trying to do, at this point, yes, proactive work, but reparative work just as much. So I think that is also a crucial piece to uphold around, as we're building the infrastructure around this protected fund, making sure that community is at the core of deciding where those dollars go. With that, we can have nice things. That is the